Alright guys, so today we are in the DIY Franimal Home Barn Gym in northern New Hampshire. This is a rustic gym going on here, and today I'm going to show you the newest piece of gym equipment I built, and that is the belt squat machine. So here we go. So in this video I'm going to show you the design of the piece of equipment, and I'm not necessarily going to provide specific dimensions on all the various components of it. Rather, I'm just going to show you the design, so if you want to build it, you can create it for your own anthropometrics. So here we go. So first, let's just check out the base here. So the base is essentially just a square. It's about 4 foot by 4 foot, and on each side of it we have a 2x6 that forms each corner of it. So we got one there. We also got one there, but it has a piece of plywood that's covering it up. Then on top of it, we have a 3/4 inch piece of plywood. So we got that plywood there. And the workings of this on the inside, as you can see, we have two 2x6s with a pulley kind of sandwiched in between there, and those 2x6s actually run all the way through and connect to the end right there. But about midway through, we have our first pulley, and that's where the weight belt will connect onto, which I'll show you later. So right here, let's just check out this design. So we have basically I believe it's a 3/8 inch cable, and it's just kind of squeezed together to form a loop. Then we have two cable ties right there that are just nice and tight so that thing doesn't slip. And that's where we'll hook our carabiner from our belt squat. So that way we can use the squats and all that good stuff. Then that cable runs through the pulley in between those 2x6s, then goes to our second pulley here. Then that's just fastened into the 2x6s by a carriage bolt. Then we have a nut and a washer up there. Now if we just follow the cable and go up, so you can check it out. Cable is nice and plumb. There we go. I had to use a level to get that plumbness. So we have our third pulley right here. So same design. We have our carriage bolt, the pulley. Now we have these two pieces kind of sandwiched in between that pulley because that created the width of this top piece similar to the base of the tower, which is 3 2x6s. So that just created more of a nice fit. And then if we keep following the cable, we have our last pulley. Then that one, as you can see, we have a hole drilled in the base here, and the cable runs down through there. There's the other side of the hole, and it comes down and attaches into our weight stack. And it attaches by a kind of a carriage bolt thing here with an eye hook that's drilled into our weight stack, and it has two wire clamps that are nice and tight so that thing doesn't slip. Let's take a little closer look at our weight stack. So this right here is 3 2x6s screwed together just on top of each other. Then on the top of the weight stack though, we have a 1x6 on the top and the bottom with a 1-inch hole drilled through, and we have our wooden dowel, two wooden dowels that run through that top and the bottom piece on the weight stack. And what those do is it prevents the weight stack from sliding or kind of moving laterally and back and forth as you use the belt squat. Now, these aren't super strong, but they don't necessarily need to be, just because they're not really taking much force. So they're just held into there just with a hole drilled. They're not actually screwed or anything. It's just kind of a tight fit. But it works fine because, again, they're not subject to that much stress. So let's take a look at the post right here for the weight stack. Now, as you can see for the design, the weights, they sit on top of each other. You'll see some belt squat machines where the post instead of having the weights where you stack them on top, if this was the weight stack, you'd have something coming out like this, and then you'd put the weights on like that. Now, I didn't use that design because making a wooden belt squat machine, I just feel like that design wouldn't be as good because you have so much more torque on that weight stack if you're placing the weights out like this and the post is out there. But with this design where the weights simply just sit on top of that wood and the post merely serves so that the weights don't slide off, there's very little stress on that post and you can really load that up good. And I highly, highly, highly ever doubt that you would load this up so much that those 3 2x6s would snap like you're breaking a board on your knee. I feel like I feel like a lot of other things would break before that happened. So this design is pretty good. I haven't had any problems with it, and I've loaded that thing up quite a bit so far. So let's take a look at the post right here. So a similar design to the weight stack. We have 3 2x6s screwed together, and that forms the 2 upright posts in a similar design for this top piece. 3 2x6s screwed together, and that just sits horizontally on top of the 2 posts. Now it is, now this top piece right here, it's just 2 2x6s with the kind of pulleys and these pieces sandwiched in between because that creates a width similar to the post, but it's actually a little smaller. It's not exact, as you can see the piece of plywood there, which is used to fasten the top piece to the post. It actually bends inwardly just a tad. If you were to follow this up, it kind of comes in just a little bit, and that's because this top piece here is just a tad bit more narrow than the post, but that really doesn't have any effect, I don't think, on the structural integrity of this thing, just because that top piece essentially experiences not a whole lot of lateral forces. It's mainly all just compressive, because if you could imagine, you have the 2 cables, they both have the same tension in them, so when everything's working, you're basically, these cables are just pulling down like that. So this really isn't experiencing a lot of kind of forces like this. It's mainly just pulling it down. All right, so we have that. Then the pieces of plywood, they're mainly there just to hold that top piece to the post. And I just think it gives it kind of more of an aesthetic appeal to it. So let's take a little look at the base of the tower here. So it's basically just some 2x4s that kind of stick out, and we have one running the long way, I guess you could call it. So that just kind of gives it a little support so it doesn't wobble too much. But the main support that prevents the wobbling is actually this outer 2x4 here. When I first made it, I didn't have these 2x4s right here running along the whole thing. And what happened is that initially just the base was connected to the post by this kind of design here. We have those steel strong ties. You know, they're screwed in nice and tight, secured, very good, but there's just so much torque because this thing's so long and so big and the floor is not totally level, which I noticed there was a tendency for this base here to kind of tilt a little bit like this, so everything wouldn't really be square. Then that wouldn't really result in a straight pull on the cable, and it just probably wasn't the best situation, but that was easily remedied by having this 2x4 that basically just runs along the whole thing. So what that does is it really just solidifies the unit, so it's basically all just one solid unit now. It keeps everything nice and square, and I really do think it also gives it kind of an aesthetic appeal too, because you kind of have that little like notch and it goes up. So I think it just looks a little better. But the main thing is that it provides it really enhances the structural integrity of it. Yeah, so that's basically it. This thing, I'll tell you, it's a tank. It works great for calf raises, belt squats. I haven't had any problems with things breaking. The only thing that I have had to watch out for is that occasionally it's just good to tighten those wire clamps, because for some reason, you know, just you're pulling the weight, you're using them, those little bolts can sometimes get a little loose. So, you know, it's smart every once in a while just kind of check on, make sure they're not falling off and stuff, because you wouldn't want to be using it and have the thing slip up. So I use this belt squat right here. Yeah, so it's a Spud Inc. brand. This is like the belt squat, the strong people use, because this thing truly is a tank. So basically what you do is I'll actually get a carabiner right here, show you how it works in action. So we'd really just take a carabiner, hook it on one side here. There you go. This is a little tricky doing this with one hand, but I think I can do it. So once we have our carabiner right here on the belt, we basically just hook it in this loop here. Then boom, right there. We got the belt. That thing's not gonna slip. Wrap it around your waist, and you'll be cranking out some nice belt squats. So I'm gonna put the camera down, and I'm gonna show you this thing working in action. Yeah. Something I've noticed when I made this is that just how everything's designed, the length of the belt squat and the carabiners and all, when you're just standing on the platform, at least for me with my limb lengths, doing a squat, I don't necessarily get a full squat where my thighs are parallel to the floor, which that can easily be circumvented just by standing on some wood, really. So for me, what did the trick to get that parallel squat was simply just by standing on 2 4x6s. Then with that, you can really get a nice deeper squat. And if that isn't enough, you could add more, or if that's too much, you could just simply stand on maybe a 2x6. So that's one thing I would keep note of and just have kicking around if you do build this, is possibly something to stand on. And it can also be useful too if you want to get extra squat or extra depth on squats, just having something to stand on. So that is just one thing to note though. I just forgot to mention one thing about the hole here. So as you can see, it's not simply just a circular hole. You kind of have that little notch cut out of it. Now, when I first made it, I did just have a circular hole. But the reason why I put that notch is because if you're doing calf raises, a lot of times you wouldn't just stand straight up. You would kind of, or I find it more comfortable if you kind of lean forward, so that way you can hold onto this. And what I noticed is with just that one hole, if you lean forward, the cable would actually kind of rub up on the side of that hole. Then over time, it actually peeled off the rubber casing of the wire. So what I did is I just took a drilled a couple holes and smoothed it off. So that way, if you do lean forward, the cable runs right through that notch and you don't have any fraying of that cable coating on the wood. So that was an easy fix, but that's something I definitely would do initially if I were to make it again.